what has two thumbs and loves Star Trek. This guy. So they just released the teaser trailer for Star Trek Into Darkness, which is the most recent Star Trek film. It's going to be released in 2013. It's directed by J.J. Abrams, who previously directed the 2009 film Star Trek. And if you're not really into the sort of Star Trek mythos, this film and the film before it basically rebooted the series in quite a novel way, which gave it a sort of alternate timeline look. So it's kind of like all the other Star Trek that's gone on for the past 40 years still happened, but this is like a new timeline where anything can happen to the characters, and it's not all been charted out for them. So characters could be killed, for example, which gives these series more drama now than it would have had if it had just been a simple prequel. Anyway, I loved the 2009 film. A lot of Star Trek fans really didn't like the 2009 film, and the reason for that was they felt that it dumbed down what Star Trek was, that it opened it up to everybody, but the price of that was too great, that the high ideals of high science fiction, which had been instilled by the creator of the series, Gene Roddenberry, had been taken away from the series. Now here's the thing, just a little recap. The previous film was a rebalancing of what Star Trek's about. It basically made things far more action orientated than they had been in a lot of ways previously. However, Star Trek always had action elements to it, certainly always had adventure elements to it, and I forgave that film for not really exploring high science fiction, simply because it had to reintroduce the characters to everybody, had to tie everything up. And really the sequel, this film that's just coming out in 2013, Star Trek Into Darkness, should really be their way of being able to do a Star Trek film which has the best of both, which has the action elements but also has sort of high science fiction elements. And when I say high science fiction, what I mean is something which uses a science fiction setting to explore issues, philosophical questions, issues about who we are as human beings, about society and things like that. Like the original series quite famously did a lot to do with racism and xenophobia and things like that, and explored those issues, and actually helped facilitate some changes in people's minds because it was so popular. So really this film should be, hopefully, a film which has those ideals. However, the trailer has just been released. I'll leave a link down to it below. I'm going to leave a link to two trailers because one is the international trailer and the other is a Japanese trailer, which is still in English but has some more clips in it than the international teaser trailer. I don't know why that is. It actually has something which is quite important in the trailer. Now here's the big thing. We've got Benedict Cumberbatch, who is, try and say that quickly, who is the fantastic actor who plays Sherlock Holmes in BBC's modern adaptation of Arthur Conan Doyle's Detective, and he is just a wonderful actor. I think he's just one of the greatest actors around at the moment. I love Sherlock, and I think what we're seeing here is he's been brought in as the villain of the piece to be the antagonist to Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise's sort of protagonists. And we don't really know who Benedict, I'm going to use his first name because we go way back. We don't know who his character actually is. It's not been announced yet. In the trailer we see a lot of carnage, we see a lot of explosions. We, much like the sort of Iron Man 3 trailer, and in some ways the Dark Knight Rises trailer, we really see something which focuses on showing this villain who just turns up and causes absolute havoc. Also, the trailer itself is very much the product of a post-Nolan Hollywood, where we have the punctuated brass of Inception playing over the trailer in many ways, or a very similar thing. We've seen that in a lot of a lot of trailers of late. It also has, to me, a bit of the palette of Inception and The Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, especially. And you know, Christopher Nolan has his films have certainly impacted the way Hollywood makes movies, which is a good thing. However, if people just keep on copying him, we're going to see a lot of films which are pretty empty and are just really cash-ins. But I hold out hope for this movie. In the trailer, we see the villain causing all sorts of havoc. It looks as if he's almost got superpowers in some way, and the thing is, there's a lot of debate about who he is. The main thing people have always said is he's Khan. If you don't follow Star Trek, there was an episode, I think it was called Space Seed in the original series, where the crew of the Enterprise encounter this character called Khan, who is basically the one of the last surviving members of a genetic super race which were made previously on Earth, and were involved in a horrible world war, and they were actually found in sort of cryogenic sleep, I think, if I remember rightly. It's been a long time since I've seen the episode. And when they're brought out, they find out that this man is a genius. He's physically stronger than any other human being. He's also a war criminal, and he is more than a match for the crew of the Enterprise. Fast forward in the 1980s, I think it was about 1982, they made a film called The Wrath of Khan, which in my opinion is still the best Star Trek movie ever made. And it's just one of the best films ever made, really. The Wrath of Khan is absolutely fantastic. If you're not into Star Trek, it doesn't matter, because it's made by someone who wasn't really into Star Trek but understood what made it great. And Nicholas Meyer made it accessible to everyone. This is I'm really going on tangents left, right and centre here, but never mind. So in The Wrath of Khan, Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise re-encounter Khan later on, and he wants his revenge. And we hear a lot of that in the trailer here. We hear Benedict Cumberbatch's character saying, you know, I'm going to have my revenge, I'm going to have vengeance. And that's made a lot of people think that it's maybe Khan. It's also made a lot of people think that it's Khan because at one point he's wearing a coat which is quite reminiscent of one of the coats from The Wrath of Khan. It's got some of the design on it. I personally think that J.J. Abrams is maybe playing with us. If we look at projects that he's been involved in, Lost, Cloverfield, etc., Super 8, he has kept the mystery to really garner interest and build hype for the film. And the thing is, in the Japanese version of the trailer, we see a human hand on a pane of glass with a Vulcan hand on the other side, and that is an iconic moment from Star Trek history, which happens at the end of The Wrath of Khan, which would then telegraph to everybody that it is Khan and all and what's probably going to happen in it. And I don't know, I just feel that maybe J.J. Abrams wouldn't do that, so I think he's maybe leading us down the path to think that it's Khan, but it might be someone else. Now, there are two other characters from the original series that I can think of. One has been mentioned all the time. It's a character called Gary Mitchell. Doesn't really sound like an imposing villain. You know, you have villain, great villains like Dracula, the Joker, Gary Mitchell. It doesn't really make you scared of him, but that character in the original series, it was actually the second pilot they did for the show, called Where No Man Has Gone Before, and he is this human being who's a member of Starfleet, ends up through this accident basically getting almost super telepathic powers, and then becomes very angry and aggressive, and we see the crew end up having to go against him. And I think that there's a possibility it could be him. At one point we see the villain in a Star Trek uniform, excuse me while I drink my green tea. So rock and roll, laced with poison. So it could be him. It could be Gary Mitchell. There is a point in the trailer where it looks almost like he's flying about and it looks like he's almost got superpowers, but at the same time, Khan is a superhuman. Basically, he's genetically engineered, so that may explain that if it is Khan. But the third one I've not heard anybody mention, My voice went all 13 years old there. One voice that I, one character that I've not heard anybody mention is a character called Charlie X, who was in the original series as well. And this is a character, I think it might be him. Not heard anybody else mention it, but I think it could be him. He is a character who the crew of the Starship Enterprise find this human being called Charlie, who is given to them by this small spaceship crew who rescued them from a planet where he basically I think there was some sort of crash there and he had to fend for himself. However, something's happened to him while he's grown up alone on this planet, on this deserted planet, and he seems to have these superpowers. He seems to be able to alter things with his mind, zip people in and out of existence and things like that. So there's a possibility that I think it might be him, and I could really see it. I could really see it being him, but I don't know. Maybe it is Khan. Maybe they have made it really obvious, and it is him. But then you would think if it was that obvious, they would mention it. Not to mention the fact that, if I remember rightly, I think Khan is supposed to be Indian, and they had Ricardo Montalban. Is that how you pronounce his name? Sorry if I mispronounced it. In the original series, and he wasn't Indian, obviously, but they had someone who wasn't exactly like me, like pale white, and you know they used to do that in films and TV series. They would never actually get someone who was of the ethnic background that they were playing. They would always get somebody who was from Latin America or looked slightly darker. But anyway, that's another point. And he played Khan. And Benedict Cumberbatch, he's kind of like me. He's a pasty mofo, and I just don't know if it is. But maybe they don't care about that. Maybe they've went a different way. It's going to be really interesting to see who he is. Excuse me again. And the trailer itself, a lot of people have complained about it because they're like, "What's this got to do with Star Trek? Doesn't look like Star Trek. Too action orientated. Where's the drama? Where's the high concepts of science fiction? Where are these things?" And I can understand that. See, this is my one problem with the trailer. I actually thought the trailer was very well made, if a bit derivative of what's going on at the moment in the sort of post-Nolan Batman Hollywood system at the moment. Post-Nolan Batman Hollywood system? There's no such system, but you know what I mean. The action element of it doesn't bother me so much, but it's more a case of, yeah, you've established everything in the first film. As I said before, you have to really bring home what Star Trek is now in this film. And what bothers me about it is that, as much as I really admire J.J. Abrams, he's on record as saying he's not a Star Trek fan. And that bothers me simply because he's always said, "I'm more of a Star Wars fan," which really means that he's looking for something which is light on ideas, more of a sort of adventure, action oriented thing. And I love the original Star Wars trilogy, but that's not Star Trek. People always said Star Trek versus Star Wars. You know, you don't really compare apples and oranges. You know, just because there's spaceships in it, they think that they're similar. They're not. And I hope that I can understand him trying to introduce some of those Star Wars elements, like he did brilliantly. The opening of the 2009 Star Trek film is as great a moment in Star Trek's history as anything else that's been done. But you know, we really need to see elements in this film which are intelligent and make us think and consider things about who we are and the world around us. That's what made Star Trek so special. So that's what I'm hoping for. The trailer does not give you anything like that, but trailers again can be very, very misleading. I mean, we're hearing about the Iron Man 3 trailer that it's not representative of the film at all. It looks like a really dark film like The Dark Knight Rises, and people are saying it's not. You know, it's just the way the trailer's been made. So maybe we will get some real pure Star Trek in this. I'm really glad the cast has stayed pretty much the same. I thought the cast were brilliant from the last film. I thought they really channeled their predecessors really well, even though some of them, like Chris Pine, I think said that he didn't really watch the the earlier episodes, but there were moments in that 2009 film where I was like, no man, you have. There's a bit of Bill Shatner in you when you're walking about, or maybe that's why they cast him in the first place, because they thought there was a similarity. But I'm real looking forward to it. I really enjoyed the last one. I just hope this isn't an empty action film. I really hope it's got some drama in it, and the effects look spectacular. J.J. Abrams always directs a good film to me, anyway. Although I haven't watched everything that he's directed, but he always does a good job. I loved Super 8, for example. I really loved that film. So we'll see what happens with it. I'll do some more updates closer to the release because I'm a huge Star Trek fan. I'm really looking forward to where they're going to go with it. And also I'm a massive fan of Benedict Cumberbatch. I can't even say his name. I actually struggled with his first name there rather than his second, which is the harder of the two. And it's going to be really interesting. I hope this is the film which could make or break Star Trek. I hope it is a success. They piqued people's interest. I mean, my girlfriend watched the last Star Trek film with me, and she just point blank refuses to watch any other Star Trek. She came out of the cinema and said that was actually really good, and I said to her, it's not that far removed from other elements of Star Trek. I said we should sit and watch The Wrath of Khan. She hasn't watched it with me yet, but it's a great film. People really should just stop having a stigma with these things and just give them a shot, see if they're great or not. They are great. So anyway, that's The Wrath of Khan. That's not The Wrath of Khan, Michael. Shut up. That's Star Trek Into Darkness. Incidentally, don't like the title. It's like, we're dark. Star Trek can be dark. It's not going to be all friendly. Star Trek Into Darkness to me seems a little bit too on the nose. I was hoping they would change it, but they're not. And there is a suggestion as well that one of the reveals that they're hiding from us is that this actually is part of like two films. That this is like the start of another trilogy. We've only really had one trilogy in the Star Trek universe, which was Star Trek 2, 3, and 4, which were all interconnected somehow. But it wasn't like a true trilogy in the way that Star Wars is an overarching story. But there are a lot of people who think that there's going to be like implied deaths and things like that at the end of it. There's parts in the trailer. I think they're going to kill off a main cast member because they can do that because it's an alternate timeline. I think they are going to do it. I don't think it's Spock because Uhura seems really upset. It looks as if she's watching someone die. I don't think it's Spock. And we see the glass, by the way. We see the glass, just like Wrath of Khan, with Spock and what looks like Kirk's hand. I wonder if they're going to turn it round. I wonder if they're going to turn it round and it'll be Kirk that you think's going to die. Anyway, that is Star Trek Into Darkness. I've already said that a million times. I'm sorry this took so long, but I love this franchise and I hope it goes from strength to strength. Really psyched for the film. I hope it's good. And that's all. I'll see you all soon. Check out the Facebook page below. Let's get some movie discussion going. And I'll be back more recently. That doesn't make any sense. But back soon with more videos. Bye for now. A lot of Star Trek fans really didn't like the 2009 film, and the reason for that was they felt that it dumbed down what Star Trek was, that it opened it up to everybody, but the price of that was too great, that the high ideals of high science fiction, which had been instilled by the creator of the series, Gene Roddenberry, had been taken away from the series. Now here's the thing, just a little recap. The previous film was a reboot film, and the film before it basically rebooted the series in quite a novel way, which gave it a sort of alternate timeline look. So it's kind of like all the other Star Trek that's gone on for the past 40 years still happened, but this is like a new timeline where anything can happen to the characters, and it's not all been charted out for them. So characters could be killed, for example, which gives the series more drama now than it would have had if it just been a simple prequel. Anyway, I loved the 2009 film. Well, has two thumbs and loves Star Trek. This guy. So they just released the teaser trailer for Star Trek Into Darkness, which is the most recent Star Trek film. It's going to be released in 2013. It's directed by J.J. Abrams, who previously directed the 2009 film Star Trek. And if you're not really into the sort of Star Trek mythos, this balancing of what Star Trek's about, it basically made things far more action orientated than they had been in a lot of ways previously. However, Star Trek always had action elements to it, certainly always had adventure elements to it, and I forgave that film for not really exploring high science fiction, um, simply because it had to reintroduce the characters to everybody, had to tie everything up. And really, the sequel, this film that's just coming out in 2013, Star Trek Into Darkness, should really be their way of being able to do a Star Trek film which has the best of both, which has the action elements but also has sort of high science fiction elements. And when I say high science fiction, what I mean is something which uses a science fiction setting to explore issues, philosophical questions, issues about who we are as human beings, about society and things like that. Like the original series, quite famously,